الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه وأعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدًا عبده ورسوله. قال الله تبارك وتعالى في القرآن الكريم: أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله وقولوا قولا سديدا يصلح لكم أعمالكم ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم ومن يطع الله ورسوله فقد فاز فوزا عظيما. أما بعد. All praise belongs to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. We thank Him, we glorify Him, and we seek His forgiveness. And I testify to the fact that there is absolutely no deity worthy of worship except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Him alone. And I further bear witness that the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wasallam is the last and the final messenger whose teachings, whose guidance, whose commandments are what we are obligated to follow in order for us to be successful not only in this life but as well as in the hereafter. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in His holy and majestic book in Surah Ali Imran ayah 102, He says, O you who have believed, be conscious of Allah as you should be conscious of Him, and do not die except in a state of Islam. He then says in Surah Al-Ahzab, ayah 70 and 71, O you who have believed, be conscious of Allah, and always say a word directed towards truth, so that He may make your conduct whole and sound. And whomever obeys Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His messenger has then attained the highest of achievements. And pay very close attention to this one ayah. Be conscious of Allah and always speak a word of truth. And then your conduct, your actions, your affairs will be whole and sound. And this is the highest of achievements, when you follow the prophetic example, the prophetic guidance. I want to share a story. I actually heard this story yesterday. There's a small town, and within that town there's a small community of Muslims and there's a small community of Christians. And within that small town there was a central figure for each religion. So there was an imam and then there was a pastor. And the Muslims were a little bit more of a minority, and the Christians were a little bit more of a majority in that small town. And after hearing a lot about Muslims in the media, the Christians of that town, they go to their pastor and they say to him, we can't have these Muslims in our town anymore because they're going to cause a ruckus, they're going to cause chaos and fasad, and they cause a lot of fitna. They disagree a lot with one another. They fight with one another. We can't have these people in our town. And the pastor says, okay, I'll go talk to their imam. And he says, what we'll do is I'll approach them and I'll make him an offer. So he goes to these Muslims and he says, go get your imam. And they get their imam, and he comes and he says, we're going to have a debate. On this day, at this hour, we're going to gather in the center of the town, and you and I are going to have a debate. If I win, you leave. If you win, you stay. The imam says, طيب, inshallah, that's fine. And they were friends with one another. They understood one another. The day came, the hour came, and all of the townspeople are gathered with the imam on this side and the pastor on this side. And they're just standing there. The moderator steps forward and he says, "People, welcome. We will now engage in a debate between the imam and the pastor. But there are some specific special rules that we all have to follow. Nobody in the audience is allowed to speak, and neither are the two debaters. The only way you can make an argument now is with your body language." So the imam and the pastor, they're looking puzzled. They're thinking to one another, and they're like, okay, fine. So right now, since the pastor challenged the imam, the pastor is the pro, and then the imam is the op. This is how debate works. So the pastor gets the first say, the imam gives the rebuttal. Back and forth 3 times. The pastor, he begins, holds up 3 fingers. Then the imam stands up, he holds up 1 finger. The pastor then looks at the crowd, thinks for a minute, and he says, then the imam looks at that, and he decides to do this. Then the pastor brings out some wine and some bread, and then the imam brings out an apple. And as soon as the imam brought out the apple, the pastor says, "That's it. I'm done. You win. You guys can stay. That was beautiful. Thank you very much. I'm sorry we had this disagreement in the first place." And then all the Christians are very puzzled. And the Muslims are very puzzled. So the Christians go to the pastor. And they say, "Your Holiness, what happened? We're so confused. We have no idea what happened." So he says, "I started off by saying, you must believe in the Trinity." And then he says, "But God is still one." And then I said, "God created all of the heavens and the earth." And then the imam said, "But at some point he's going to lay them all to rest." And then the pastor said, "But remember the sacrifice of Jesus." So I brought out some wine and some bread. But then the imam said, "But yes, we remember the sacrifice, but we also remember that we all share the original sin of Adam. And that is why we are here in the first place." And with that response, I lost the debate because he saw the bigger picture. Then the Muslims go to the imam and they say, "Yeah, Imam, what happened?" He said, I don't know. I just gave my responses. I was in the moment." He said, "The pastor said, you leave in 3 days." He said, "Not a single one of us is leaving." He said, "We'll tear down your homes." He said, "We'll sleep on the ground." And then he brought out his lunch and I brought out my lunch. The moral of the story and the purpose of the story is that we all have different ways of interpreting what we see. Different ways of interpreting what we hear. Different ways of seeing life. And in those differences, those different ways of interpretation, those different ways of seeing life, what happens is that when we start to disagree with one another, that is when chaos starts to occur. In the beginning of the story, the Christians that wanted the Muslims to leave were confused. They had a disagreement, and they tried to resolve it in a way that they saw fit at that moment. But the way that we go about life and the way that we go about practicing our own personal ways, our own personal views, our own personal opinions of religion, of God, and of humanity, why is it that it always results in discord? We know from the prophetic example that discord is evil. And hatred and evil comes from disagreements and discord. However, there is a difference between disagreeing with someone and then disagreeing with someone with respect. And that is the most important point that we need to understand when it comes to the concept of ikhtilaf. When we're talking about ikhtilaf, disagreements, We have to understand that there's a very strong basis of disagreements in our Islamic tradition. There are books upon books, volume sets that have been written on one single topic, and that topic is the adab of disagreement, the manners of disagreeing with someone. The scholars of the past, our pious predecessors, they all disagreed with one another. They had their differences. They had plenty of debates as well. But never at the end did they say, I'm not talking to you. You go your way, I go my way. That's not how they, interacted with one another. But nowadays, we're in our own silos. We've created our own bubbles. We've become the entourage and the following of a specific scholar or imam. And God forbid that imam makes a mistake and suddenly, there's fights not between the imams, not between the scholars, but between the people who follow them. And it's very interesting when we think about this psychology of how we deal with one another, this psychology of disagreements. What do we gain from all of this? So we have to understand this very specific point about disagreeing with respect. There's a very interesting story about Umar radiallahu anh. And we know the character and the personality of Umar radiallahu anh. Very strong, dominant personality. His way or the highway kind of personality, right? That's what we'd assume. Right, it's that same Umar radiallahu anh where a woman had a miscarriage just from seeing him. That Umar radiallahu anh. And in order to tell Umar that he shouldn't be worried and he shouldn't feel sad, that people are afraid of him, Rasulullah ﷺ told Umar that you do not walk one way, that the shaitan walks the complete opposite direction when he sees you. So this dominant Umar radiallahu anh, you know what he did when he became the Khalifa? He took away the position of Khalid ibn Walid as the commander general. And he gave it to someone else who was a little bit softer in personality. Because Khalid ibn Walid and Umar radiallahu anh were what? While they were contemporaries, while they were both warriors, they were very similar in personality. They thought the same way. They acted the same way. They approached issues the same way. And Umar radiallahu anh knew that if he had Khalid ibn Walid in his shura, not much would get done because people would constantly be in agreement with one another. So he said, I want someone who can contend what I say. I want someone who can disagree respectfully with what I say, not someone who's going to agree with my approach. So Umar radiallahu anh created a situation where he wanted someone to disagree with him. Isn't that kind of interesting? That brings us to two specific ideas. There's ikhtilaf, which is mahmud, and then there's ikhtilaf, which is madmoom. There's an ikhtilaf, which is praiseworthy, and then there is an ikhtilaf, which is blameworthy. Two different kinds of disagreements. Let's talk about ikhtilaf, which is praiseworthy. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we have created the heavens and the earth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we created the night and the day. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, we have created you in pairs and made you into what? Nations and tribes, so that what? You may know one another. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is constantly giving us this perspective of contrast, where I created this, but I also created that. Heaven, hell, night, day, this, that. But this kind of ikhtilaf is praiseworthy because it tells us that there is a variety. There is difference in creation. And within that variety, within that difference, there is beauty. There is beauty in that difference. There is beauty in this room with the many different colors, shapes, and sizes that we have. There is beauty in the many different personalities that we all have. There is beauty in the many different kinds of ways we approach life. There's beauty in all of our different experiences. There's beauty in all of our different, own families. Are those not differences? Is that not a variety? With all that variety, how is there so much oneness? And that's very beautiful. The fact that there could be so much of a variety, so many different kinds of people, so many different kinds of approaches, interpretations. But at the end, it always leads to what? Oneness. Oneness, tawheed. What's the second law of thermodynamics? Everything is a constant state of disorder. Right? How do you explain this? You know, there's more ways that your room can be messy than it can be clean. Yes? We're the young men in the room. Yes? Your parents tell you to clean your room. There's more ways that it can be messy than it can be clean, right? Yeah, he's nodding his head. There's only one way that you can clean your room. You put this here, you put that there, everything's in order, but there's a million different ways that it can be messy. Constant disorder. And you can only have it optimally clean at one point, but after that point of cleanliness, you have a gradual state of disorder. A gradual state of chaos. Until what? You clean it again. We have an idea of this in the Quran as well. ظُلُمَاتِ إِلَى النُّورِ. Look at this. What are we seeing from this? ظُلُمَات إِلَى النُّورِ. What is it? ظُلُمَات is what? Singular or plural? It's plural. What's nur? It's singular. What is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling us? From darknesses into light, not darkness into light. From all of the different paths of darkness, there's one path to nur. There is one path to light. From all of the different differences, all of the different disagreements, all of the different forms of chaos and destruction and trial and tribulation, there is one way that you come back. And it's that what? Sirat al-Mustaqim. That's how we go back. That's how we find Allah. So disagreements are natural. Disagreements are normal. But when we disagree, we must disagree with respect. أقول قولي هذا واستغفر الله لي ولكم فاستغفروه إنه هو الغفور الرحيم. الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على رسول الكريم اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد أما بعد. I have two more stories to share. During the early Medinan period, there were two tribes, Aus and Khazraj. And these two tribes were always at war with one another. And just even months before the arrival of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, there was a battle known as Bu'af. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, out of his magnificent character and his beautiful message, he was able to unite the two biggest warring tribes in Medina. And one day, these two tribes were sitting with one another talking about life. So the Aus were on one side and the Khazraj were on one side, and they were even mixing with one another. That's how close they were getting in their brotherhood. And this one specific person by the name of Shasib ibn Qais had a specific problem with this. He said, how is it possible that these two warring tribes, the Aus and the Khazraj, could just come together just like that and forget their differences? And in our day today, in our lives, there are people like this too. People who just can't stand it when people get along. They want to see, they feed off of this chaos. They feed off of destruction. They feed off of disagreement. They don't like it. They want drama. And you have to avoid these people completely. Completely. Wallahi, for your own sake and for your family's sake. Avoid these people. But there are people that feed off of this. They enjoy it. They love it. It sustains them. Avoid these people. But at that time, there were also people like this as well. They wanted to create discord. They wanted to create, disagreement. They wanted people to fight. So, what happened? Shasib sends a young boy. He says, go to them and remind them of the battle of Bu'af. Remind them of the battle of Bu'af. Remind them how they were warring with one another. Remind them who won the battle. Remind them who lost the battle. So this young boy goes and he's like, ha ha ha. He starts, coming inside the circle a little bit. And he says, oh guys, by the way, remember Bu'af? Pitch silence. And then there's some awkward laughter. And then he's like, yeah, I remember the Aus, they won that battle. And then things get a little, even more awkward. And then the Aus were like, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, we won that battle. We were the better warriors. And the arrogance starts to seep in a little bit. Then the Khazraj were like, yes, but we have, the better tactics and the better strategy. And that was just an anomaly. That event was an anomaly. We could have got you guys on any other day. And slowly and slowly that discord starts to come in. The disagreements start to come. And at some point, it escalates so far and wide that they say there's nothing between us except for Al-Har. And that Har was a place of battle in Medina. There's nothing between us except for that place of battle. And now these two tribes were getting together. They were putting on their armor, readying their swords, brandishing them, getting ready to fight. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he finds out about this. And this beautiful, beautiful man, he comes up to them and he says, is that what this is? Just ignorance and I'm in the middle of this? You want me to be in the middle of all this ignorance? And it came to the point where these people just felt so much shame for themselves that they hugged and kissed Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and asked him for his forgiveness. Think about what makes us disagree with one another. What is it? Emotion? Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam passed away. Umar radiallahu anh walked around with his sword brandished, and he said, anyone who says Muhammad is dead is what? I'm gonna do some dirty business on them. I'm gonna take care of them. And then who took care of that situation? It was Abu Bakr radiallahu anh. And he said, any of you who thinks Muhammad is alive, know that he dies and we all die. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that never dies. So if you are following Muhammad, you might as well follow yourselves off a cliff, because that's not the point of all of this. That's not the point of all of this. You're following your imam, you find out your imam is corrupt. That's not the point of all of this. You find out your imam is corrupt, you find out your imam had relations with other women, you find out your imam, was involved in some shady business. You don't follow your imam, because when our teachers fall, what happens? Islam lives. Islam lives. Allah is there. Your teachers die. Your teachers fall. Your teachers can be corrupt. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one that is always there. Imam Majid, the Imam of Adam Center, he once gave us a story. He said, once when I was a young boy, I would follow my father. His father was the Mufti of Sudan. He said, I would follow my father on his different trips. And I had a tendency to admire people a lot. He said, I would admire, different shuyukh, different imams, different scholars. And I really enjoyed being in their company. But he said, I was enamored one day by the idea that we were going to see the royal family of a specific nation. He said, I was going to get to meet the royal family of a specific nation. And then Imam Majid said, but my father, he noticed this excitement in me and he said, remember this. He said, anyone that you're enamored by, anyone that you admire to an unrealistic capacity, remember this. They use the bathroom, they need to sustain themselves somehow, and then someday they die. They will die. Just humanize those individuals. This celebrity culture that we have going on in our community is a nasty thing. We can't see these people as infallible because why? They make mistakes. They make mistakes. But what's even worse is when we start to take sides to these different arguments. Sometimes we just have to think of a situation and then just leave it completely. It doesn't concern us. Why is it that this person's deen, or why is it that my deen is so dependent on this person's deen? It shouldn't be that way. Our deen is between us and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's what makes Islam beautiful. That's what makes Islam beautiful. There's no need for an intermediary. If you want Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala to speak to you, what do you consult? The Quran. And if you want to speak to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, what do? You do this, or you pray. You make your salawat. That's how we communicate with our Rabb. Not many other religions have this kind of scenario. They don't have the ability to do that. In order to communicate with God, they need to go to their holy ones. Islam is not that way. We go to our teachers for guidance and for knowledge and to learn from them. But ultimately, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the one who makes sure that we are guided and our deen is solid. So remember these different facts. Remember these different things. And remember that yes, it is okay to differ on different matters. It is okay to have disagreements in different matters. But disagree with respect. Someone says something, you don't have to always have the last word. You can say, "Tayyib, inshallah, I disagree with you. We disagree with one another. Let's just end it at that. You're still my brother." Because the idea of brotherhood and the idea of sisterhood are far more vital than you giving off your point that your teacher is the better teacher and your interpretation of Islam is the better interpretation. Because the Muslim ummah has suffered enough at the hands of disagreements. Entire nations, entire tribes, and entire civilizations that were post-Islam were destroyed because of this. Were destroyed because of the idea of ikhtilaf madhmoom. Were destroyed because of rancor and discord and evil and hatred and disagreement. But these things can be overcome when we begin to understand that our disagreements, our differences have beauty in them. And all of those different varieties, all of those different differences, all of those different disagreements all lead back to what? Tawheed. The oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we praise Allah and we ask Allah to forgive us. Allahumma hdina fi man hadayt, wa afina fi man afayt, wa tawallana fi man tawallayt, wa barik lana fi ma a'tayt, wa qina bi rahmatika wasrif anna sharra ma qadayt, innaka taqdi bil haqqi wa la yuqda alayk, wa la yudhillu man walayt, wa la ya'izzu man aadayt, tabarakta rabbana wa ta'alayt, nastaghfiruka Allahumma min jami' ad-dunubi wal khataya wa natubu ilayk. Allahumma ighfir lil muslimina wal muslimat, wal mu'minina wal mu'minat, al ahya'i منهم والأموات إنك سميع قريب مجيب الدعوات ربنا آتنا في الدنيا حسنة وفي الآخرة حسنة وقنا عذاب النار عباد الله إن الله يأمر بالعدل والإحسان وإيتاء ذي القربى وينهى عن الفحشاء والمنكر والبغي يعظكم لعلكم تذكرون. If I have said anything that is in error, indeed it is from the evils of my own nafs, and I ask you for your forgiveness. If I have said anything that is good, indeed it is from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and Him alone. Aqim as-salah.